He's never won an election before, but on Sunday night, Emanuel Macron staged one of the biggest electoral upsets in French history. This was the result of the first round of voting, Macron coming out ahead of the populist far-right candidate Marine Le Pen. His centre-right opponent François Fillon and the far-left Jean-Luc Mélenchon were left trailing behind. Let's have a listen now to how these two leading candidates reacted to the result.
My dear countrymen, the country is going through an unprecedented moment in its history, marked by terrorism, economic challenges, social suffering of workers, and urgent environmental problems. They've responded in the most beautiful way, by voting en masse.
We've made the first step which will take the French people to the Élysée Palace. This result is historic. It confers on me the immense responsibility of defending the French nation, its unity, its security, its culture, its prosperity, and its independence.
And this was the reaction on the markets. France's benchmark stock index, the CAC 40, surging nearly 5% to a 9-year high at one point, with bank stocks posting nearly double-digit percentage gains. US stocks also getting a boost from the news, and even Turkey's main stock index hit a new record high. The euro also surging against the US dollar, rising to nearly $1.09, its highest level in 3 weeks. We'll have more analysis of how the markets reacted in a moment. But first, let's listen to what ordinary French people had to say about this historic shift in their country's politics.
For me, it's the collapse of the parties. The Socialist Party is at 8%, I think. We have never seen this, but I understand that people have had enough of traditional parties and want something else.
It's a festival. We won the first round of the presidential election. It's important for us. We expect a rebirth of France, and Le Pen is the only candidate who can bring change.
It annoys me immensely. I was born here, I grew up here, and I want to leave something for my children. I don't want them to live with extremism or extremist leaders.
So let's go live to Paris now, and our editor-at-large, Craig Capetus, is there, been following every twist and turn in this election so far, and it's not over, right, Craig? So some opinions there from both ends of the political spectrum, but there have been protests today in Paris. What's the mood like right now where you are?
Well, the mood in Paris is nearly 35% of the population of the city voted for Emanuel Macron. So they're all quite happy. But let's make no mistake about it, Emmanuel Macron and his party En Marche is a personality cult right now that got about 8.5 million votes. On the other side, you have the Front National, headed by Marine Le Pen. Think of that as a nasty football supporters club with about 7.6 million votes. And the conventional wisdom is Macron is going to win. But the real question is, can Macron govern? Will he know how to govern? As they say in the United States, can the boy hit a curveball? Because right now,
Well, exactly that, Craig. So the markets, as we've seen, are hoping that Macron will win in the second round and that his win will lead to stability in Europe. I mean, that is the lofty aim of everyone that is watching this. Is he going to deliver? Can he deliver?
Well, look, as campaigns demand an abundance of rhetoric, they don't demand action to fit the rhetoric. That requires legislative action. So right now, at this point in time, there are 577 deputies that need to be elected in June. Right now, only a total of 3 are supporting Macron and/or Le Pen. What is the big issue? The big issue is whether he can put together a government. Now, today I was speaking with some politicians, MPs on both sides of the spectrum, and what they're saying is, yes, he can put together a government, but his ability to say nothing so far and yet consistently mesmerize the French public is the perfect foil to Le Pen's craziness, which you're hearing a lot of here in Paris. When you talk about specifically the EU, the problem you hear from the MPs, it's like the old uncle in the closet you don't want to let out. Greek debt. $350 billion. What is the vulnerability of the French government and the French banks? What happens if there's a default? What is Macron going to do to deal with this with his German partners? So far, silence from Macron.
Well, indeed. Well, and I'm glad you brought up Le Pen there, because, I mean, this is the other elephant in the room, so to speak. I mean, the pollsters are putting Macron ahead, but what are the prospects of Le Pen staging an upset?
Well, you know, we've got 2 weeks. He could, Macron in the debate could foul up. He could say something wrong. Who knows? But the conventional wisdom, as I say here, is that Le Pen is going to lose. Having said that, Paris is not the place to really ask that question, because Paris is squarely behind Macron. The markets are behind Macron. And what Jacques Maillard, the deputy, tells me is this: he's going to put together a government, and he deserves to put together a government. But Maillard and others I've spoke to told me today that that government might only last until next May. And they're expecting more legislative elections, another round, a new government by next May. That's the talk behind closed doors. And of course the markets love this, wouldn't you, as they were fearing that Jean-Luc Mélenchon was going to be a candidate. Indeed. And he wanted to socialize all the banks.
Absolutely. Craig Capitas in Paris, thank you so much. Well, earlier I spoke to Jasper Lawler. He's a market analyst at the London Capital Group. He says that there is a risk that the markets have risen too far, too fast, but that the polls have been accurate this time round.
It's a massive risk-on rally at the moment. We're seeing it across almost every asset class. Traditional havens like gold and the yen selling off. And I think that reaction probably is right. Macron won the first round of the election. He was always the favorite for the second round. And I think one of the things that markets like from this result is that actually the polling, unlike on many recent occasions, proved pretty accurate. So if the polling continues to be accurate, they price in, the typical poll prices in about a 60% chance that Macron wins the whole thing, takes probably 60% of the seats, then that's a fairly comfortable victory for him. And I think what we're seeing at the moment is almost all possibility of Le Pen going through to be president of France coming out of the markets at the moment.
I'm glad you brought up the issue of the polls there. They do all point to a Macron win in the second round, you're right. But what happens if those pollsters get it wrong, as they have done in the past, and Le Pen wins? Where do the markets go after that?
Well, I think it would be a sharp correction of the moves that we've seen today. We saw the euro break out to its highest levels this year, 109 to the dollar. You know, we can see that quickly head back below 105, because ultimately what we're dealing with here and what we're now pricing out of the market is this redenomination risk for the euro, that actually almost an existential risk for the euro. If Le Pen comes through to president, she said there's going to be a referendum on France's membership of the eurozone. It's not 100% that she's going to be able to make that happen, but it becomes a big risk. And so the markets would have to react pretty violently in the other direction to reprice that possibility. But we tend to think, alongside the market, it's now a bit of a remote chance, and that probably the mainstream of the French political voters, given these two alternative choices to the mainstream, are probably going to go for the slightly more conservative of those alternatives.